Hey, it's Pete. Welcome back to the workshop. So, I've been doing some spring cleaning around the shop, trying to organize my hardware and parts better by standardizing and consolidating the way that I store them. And along the way, I came up with an idea that allows me to make the Harbor Freight storage cases that much more versatile and allowed me to get rid of all of these. I'm going to share that with you next. So if you've seen my previous videos, it's no secret that I'm a fan of these Harbor Freight storage cases. I really like them for mixing and matching and saving parts. But one of the things that is a problem with them is that there's only three sizes of inserts available in these cases. They come with a small size, which is like this right here, and then a medium size, which is twice the small size, and then we have a large size, which is four times the little one or twice the big one. The problem with these is that this isn't always enough. Sometimes you have things that are long and narrow that won't fit in any of these, or sometimes you have something that's just a little bit bigger than this, so you have to jump up to these, and then you're wasting a whole lot of space. So what I started thinking about doing was, if I used my 3D printer, I could potentially just make cases of my own. So if you examine the top of the case, you'll notice all these index marks, which allow you to put any one of these small bins really anywhere in the case, and it will lock in place. So the entire grid is based off of these smaller ones, and that lends itself to the idea, well, as long as you make inserts that are multiples of that size there, you could make bins that would fit in this case of any size you'd like. So I grabbed a couple quick dimensions off of one of the existing inserts, just the width and the depth of the top rim. I guessed at the radiuses in the corners, and then measured the height as well, and was able to build up a model from there. Did a little bit of work and redesigned the feet for the bottom. And then after the model was complete, I sent the whole thing off to Simplify 3D, where I sliced it up and then sent it to my printer. Now, my printer is fairly heavily modified. I've taken all the electronics off of the printer itself and moved them outside of an enclosure that I've put around the printer. That allows me to completely seal the printer up, which is important if you want to print ABS. It prevents drafts from getting into the printer, which can cause the print to warp, and by moving the electronics outside, that prevents the electronics from overheating in that enclosed space. Inside the space itself, it can get up to about 50 degrees Celsius just by being enclosed. So it took a couple hours to print. That could probably be optimized. I tend to go a little bit heavier on the infill than I probably would need to, and add a little bit more detail than I probably would have to have. But overall, I'm happy with the results. The first thing I did was actually to create the mid-sized bin. Now, there's really probably no reason to print this bin because they're available in the cases now. There is a couple differences, though, between this and the stock bin. The feet on these are just a little bit bigger, which allows them to fit nicer, actually, into the bottom of the case. Also, because these are 3D printed rather than being injection molded, there's no taper to the sides, so it makes the internal volume just ever so slightly larger. So once I had this, I went back to Fusion 360, and because it's a parametric based CAD system, I could change one dimension and have the entire model changed for me. And that allowed me to create the smaller bin with just one change of a dimension. And that came out really well. So I started trying my theory out of making other sizes. For instance, one that would be a size and a half here. I created that. And then I created one that's basically four of the smaller ones. Now this one here in reality has the same internal volume as the stock one that comes with the Harbor Freight case, but it's in a different form factor. So if you have something that's long and narrow, it'll fit better in this, then obviously it wouldn't fit at all in this. And then from there I went on to create an even larger piece. So I have an underlying belief that tools and their hardware or consumables should not be stored together. I don't think it makes any sense to, for instance, store my screwdrivers inside of my container of screws. I don't always use them together. Sometimes I just need a screwdriver to go remove a screw from something else. It wouldn't make sense for me to have to dig out my parts container and dig through the screw container to find the screwdriver I wanted. Occasionally, though, I think there is a case where the tool and its consumables should be stored together, and that's when you have a single function tool. Something like my wire crimpers. I think it makes sense to store the wire crimpers with your crimp-on terminals because you're never going to use one without the other. Now, when I'm working in my shop, one of the things I like to do is just fix what bothers me. And what's been bothering me lately is my stack of Kreg jig tools and screws. These are all in their own individual cases, and they sit in a pile under my workbench, and they're always falling over. So this seemed like a good thing to try to put into one of these cases. There were a couple problems. There's a large tool like this, the clamp, and that's not necessarily a problem. We can use the Kaizen foam trick that I did in a previous video and just make an insert for that to sit down in. What was a bigger problem, though, is the tool itself. So the tool has the jig and some a driver bit as well as this drill bit. And the problem comes right here with this drill bit. There's a built-in gauge in this case that shows you how to set this set collar on the bit for different depths. Now that's not 100% needed. You can figure it out without that, but it is a nice feature to have, and I wouldn't be able to do that with just Kaizen foam. So what I thought I would do is take a couple dimensions here, go back to Fusion 360, use one of my new insert sizes, and try to build something that these things would fit in. So what I came up with was this guy right here. It's basically this size here that I created. It has room for the drill bit and the driver as well as the Allen wrench in here. And the best part of all, though, is it preserves the functionality of this little gauge right here. So my new case insert holds the driver bit and the drill bit as well as the Allen wrench, and then the jig itself fits in one of my other sized cases. And of course that just leaves cutting a piece of Kaizen foam for the clamp. What I was doing there. I like to put masking tape on the foam when I'm cutting it to size. I find it helps me lay out the initial dimensions better. With this tool not being flat, I initially have to mark out an area and dig a recess so that I can set the tool down in to be able to trace around it better. If you're curious about any of the tools or parts that I'm using, I will share links to them down in the video description. Now, obviously, I am not a cabinet maker, and this is not a huge collection of Kreg accessories. If I was doing cabinet making all the time, I would need a much bigger collection. This wouldn't work for me. But just being a guy out tinkering in his shop, I think this is going to work out just fine. Now, I have found there is a slight ridge on these handles, so before applying a label, I always just take the edge of a razor blade and scrape it across it, just to remove that ridge before placing the label on there. So I'm slowly filling up the parts cases in my organizer, and I have a few in there that don't have labels on yet. Those ones, some of them are empty, and some of them are just confused. They haven't really spoken to me yet to tell me what they are. They're a collection of oddball parts, and having trouble figuring out exactly what the label is that's going to make it clear for me to remember what's in that case. I hope you got some value from this, maybe picked up an idea or two you can use in your own shop. I really think the addition of those extra sizes is going to make those Harbor Freight cases so much more versatile. And if you'd like to see how I built this cabinet to hold the cases, click that link over to the left and I will see you over there.